is the mic on? Hey, can you hear me up in the balcony up there? Let's get the show going. I am proud and honored to have once again my good friend Mike Williams on my show, which, by the way, is not sponsored by Pfizer. We're celebrating his 64th birthday today, January 6th. He is by far one of the best researchers I have listened to on so many topics, and he never leaves a stone uncovered when he chooses one to look at. He has become the go-to guy for everything Fab 4, and since 64 is always connected to them, let's hear it now, just a snippet.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
Ooh, did you like that, folks? If you have not noticed, the number 6 is used a lot out there. Agenda 19, 6 feet apart, and we are buried 6 feet under.
Oh, boy.
6 feet apart. Oh, 6 feet under. They've loved that number. They sure do. Hey, hey. Right from the start. Their okay sign is really 666, folks. We should all know that by now. Today, January 6th, our Veep Camel Toe Harris has compared this day to Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, and 9/11/2001, which was the project for a new American century's new Pearl Harbor, when in both cases the actual events are not at all what they have been reported to be to the masses. So January 6th is much like them in that the truth about all of them has never been given. So today let's discuss with Mike where all the lies are taking us to now, and hope people will see it all before we're at their New World Order communism. And did I mention already, this show is not brought to you by Pfizer or anything else that is not good for you. What we're going to do, though, is play music, Mike's music. And today's all about Mike. Be like Mike, okay, folks? Research. Let's go. Let's start the show, Sasha. Get it going.
Happy birthday, a great big to-do. Let's celebrate, yeah, celebrate you. So make a wish on your special day. You're looking great, so great, come celebrate.
Hey there, Mr. Shield. I see you wrote a book. I heard about the rumors, so I had to take a look. Going back to yesterday, I see a different guy. And you may say there is no way, but I see through the lie. Billy Pepper, Billy Pepper. You said hello when the first guy waved goodbye. You went
Getting a lot of happy birthdays for you, Mike. Coming in on the chat.
Then you kissed the sky.
I may join on the chorus if you don't mind.
Touch of magic sprinkled in the air. A little touch of plastic and a new head of hair. Billy Pepper,
Billy Pepper,
Billy Pepper.
Billy Pepper. That's George Pepper on lead there, or Mike Pepper. All these peppers everywhere, right?
Billy Pepper, Billy Pepper. it's you. Sometimes you have 6 toes, but who knows if that's true? Billy Pepper, Billy Pepper. Hey there, Mr. Shears, I see you wrote a book. I heard about the rumors, so
Mike,
I
do you have your
had
YouTube
to
up? Can you see the
take a
slideshow?
look. Going
he's not
back
singing
to yesterday, I see a different guy. And you may say there is no way, but I see through the lie. Billy Pepper, Billy Pepper, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks for all the happy birthdays coming in already.
Come on down. Billy Pepper, Billy Pepper, yeah, yeah, yeah. Billy Pepper,
Hey, everybody coming in. Mike, happy birthday to you. It's a big one in Beatle history, so happy birthday to you, buddy.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sasha, for having me back on the show.
Well, you're always welcome, and I think this is our 6th time together, so the number 6 keeps coming up all the time, man. We had a little delay here. We had a little problem here, but we're glad to have it on now. And first time we did a show, we talked over 2 hours, and it felt like about a half hour. So I thought the best place to start, since we started with your Billy Pepper song, is the memoirs for Billy Shears books that are out. And they were we had them on the slideshow, and a lot of PID researchers don't even read those books. And give us a little update to people that don't know about the books. First off, the first one was a red book that came out in 999, and that was also the day the Beatles songs showed up on iTunes. Coincidence? I don't think so. And the second book came out in 9918, so the number 9 is big in both John and Paul's history. And the memoirs is all encoded. So tell the listeners today a little bit about all these 3 books, and Billy's back as well.
Yeah, so like you said, John, the Red Book came out September 9, 2009, and that was also the same day that I believe the Beatles Rock Band was released.
With iTunes,
And also-
too. And
Yep.
iTunes.
And also, it was also the same date that the Beatles machine, the Enterprise, released the Past Masters on CD. So it's a date that is used a lot in the Beatles circle, and so it has a lot of importance. So the first book released September 9, 2009, and then the book was updated, I believe, with a major update in 2018. So it was released on September 9th, 2018, so we have 999 again. We take the 2 last digits of the year, 2018. 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. And since then, I think there's been about maybe 2 or 3 other updates. The most significant update that took place back in 2021, I think it was 2018, was the footnotes. Tom added the footnotes to the book. The original version,
Okay.
first edition, didn't have footnotes. So when Tom added the footnotes, it filled in a lot of blanks, and the footnotes also were able to deviate from the narrative. So it gave a lot more information and clarity historically as to what went on and what was going on. So we're now at the point where Tom released the 2022 version in November of this past year, and he mentioned to me that another update, I don't think it's going to be a major update, it might be uploaded to Amazon as we speak. So over time, what's happened is the footnotes have gotten a lot more direct, I should say. There's not a lot of ambiguity, and so it fills in a lot of the gaps that people were asking questions about in the past, especially if you went back to the 2009 book. And I mentioned to you before we got started here that Tom had mentioned to me that there's a possibility that this year, 2023, that they're looking to make the book go more mainstream. So right now it's kind of underground and it's got a very small, if you will, following, but it sounds like what they're looking to do is to step it up. And I'm going to make an assumption that that means that it might go to a major publisher in order to do that. So the book is getting more and more traction, and especially when I think it was last year, or maybe it was the year before. Sometimes I just lose track of time, but Tom had put the website, The Memoirs of Paul, and on that site, both Billy's The Lyrics, 1956 to present, and The Memoirs of Billy Shears were co-marketed together.
Right, which is something
And that
that
was-
I think is huge. And by the way, when you mentioned Tom, mention his last name, Thomas E.U. Harriet. He's the guy
Right.
who does the encoding for Billy in all the books that he does. And you have sometimes firsthand accounts with him in emails periodically, which is really another thing that gives you more credibility.
Yeah. So Tom and I have established a relationship. It's a professional relationship, friendship over the last 6 years, and it's something that just grew naturally because he had this book published. He is the author / encoder, and I'll get into the encoding bit in a moment. And I was this guy that used the book. Well, I first read it back in 2016. It blew me away, and then I set off to do research to find out if what was said in the book was truthful. And so since then, it's been over 6 years now. I've been doing the research and then publishing my research on my YouTube channel. And over the course of time, Tom and I have conversed here and there. Mostly it has to do with me communicating with him, asking him certain questions that I might have. But also, when I spoke about the website, The Memoirs of Paul, co-marketing both books, in the, I believe it was the 2021 version of Memoirs, there's a plug for the lyrics in the Memoirs of Billy Shears in the very beginning of the book. So what we see happening is the two worlds. There is the official narrative, and then we have the real narrative, or the more realistic narrative. They're coming together now. So this is all part of Billy's process of trying to disclose.
Well, and all the work that you've done too. One of the biggest, more popular or unpopular one was, did the Beatles write their own music? And that one is amazing because when you did it, you found that Rubber Soul was the smoking gun, where they wouldn't have had time to write the songs for that great album. They would have time to sing it, but that's it. And people really need to go to your Sage of Quay if they don't know your work and watch that and start to get off the Beatle religion, which is what it really is. And it was all Tavistock created. It wasn't organic. The band just didn't come together. And that's what you've shown me more than anything, because my nickname in college was Lennon, so you knew, as we all were influenced by them more than anybody. But now I say we're all Tavistock influenced songwriters at the end of the day. But anyway, now you wanted to go into the encoding of the book, which a lot of PID people who don't research this don't have any idea of because they've never read it.
Yeah, that's a problem that runs across a lot of these communities, these Paul is Dead communities, where people consider themselves to be Paul is Dead researchers or investigators, and they go off and say, well, the book is fiction. And the first question you have to ask these folks is, have you read the book? And the vast majority of them have not. Or if they have read it, they read it just to say that they did, but they had no intentions of altering their view of their own research because they have their dogma. They are just cemented in their dogma and they won't move off of it. So what they do instead, like I said, most of them have not read the book. And so folks who are listening, if you see any of those types of comments out there, that's the response. Have you read the book? Because this would be like you're looking to buy a car and somebody writes a review for a car that never test drove it, never sat in the car.
Right.
Would you buy a car from somebody who wrote a review that never tested the car? You would not. So this is what we have in the Paul is Dead community as well. So they don't understand the encoding. They don't. Many of these other researchers, they just want to embrace that Cinderella story. The basic premise goes like this: the Beatles were organic. They reached all that fame and fortune based upon all of this talent. They were magical. They had chemistry and so on. And then they were commandeered by the evil Billy Shears. It's almost like Star Wars. Darth Vader stepped in.
Right.
And what they don't understand is that the whole Beatles thing was a massive psychological operation. It was a massive social engineering initiative, as is all music.
As is all the things we're told. Look at after 9/11 of 2001, I was a 9/11 truther, and I was a lonely guy. But take what you just said. Have you read the book? I would tell people, have you researched 9/11? And they haven't. They haven't. If you're taking all the things that we are told from the TV, mainstream news, the government. By the way, people, if you don't know this, the government, entertainment, sports, this is all one club. This is how the only actor we ever heard was for sure an actor was Ronald Reagan, but guess what? They're all actors. The Beatles are actors. And that's what we got to understand if we want to understand what's going on with this Agenda 19. It's all part of creating $1 trillion deficit worldwide, and one world order is what it is. And the Beatles are a big part of it, because think about it. If you see all these lately, and since the Get Back movie came out, have you seen all the famous people and so many videos saying the Beatles were their biggest influence, no matter what, even in comics, Dana Carvey, all these people. Oh, the Beatles were the ones we loved the most. And that's the religion that they made.
Yes. Yeah, it's a cult. It's a cult. And when I released Did the Beatles Write All Their Own Music back in April of 2020, it turned not only the Beatle fan base community on its head, but also many in the Paul is Dead community. Because as I mentioned before, many of these folks that are doing the Paul is Dead or the Beatles research, they only wanted to start from 1966 forward. They did not want to take a look at the early period, let's say from 1960 through 1966. So so it was one of those pieces of research that you do. I knew that when I was going to release it, that it was going to catch a lot of flack, and there was going to be a lot of hate coming my way. But you know what? It's okay, because the truth is the truth, John. And you can't step back from the truth. You have to put it out there, and you just have to put your shields up, get your flak jacket on, and step out into the battlefield, because that's just the way it is. People are very comfortable with the lies. They're really comfortable with it. They like the lies because the lies make them feel good. But you're living in a virtual reality. It's not how the reality truly is. And we're never going to get out from under all this unless more and more people wake up and step up to the plate and seek and pursue the truth, So as far as the encoding in the book, let me just cover that real quick, because that was your initial question. There's really 3 layers of encoding in the book, and there's actually a 4th, and I'll explain that in a moment. The first layer is you just read the book face value, right? You don't do anything else other than just read the words of the page. The second layer, Tom, who has skills in encoding, and just as a side note, a number of years ago, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, I asked Tom about how he learned to encode, and he said to me that it was something that he was taught when he was younger, but he had no idea why. So this is very consistent with how secret societies and Freemasonry works. People are taught certain skills, And at the time, they may not know why that skill is being taught to them. And then later on, they get tapped for a piece of work. And that's what happened to Tom. So the second layer is what's referred to as word stacking. So on every page of the book, and the book has 666 pages, there are bolded out letters. So when you read the bolded out letters, now you're getting another sentence or two. So now it's a deeper dive into the book. And then the third layer is called the acrostical code. So the acrostical code would be every other letter at the beginning of each sentence. When you read the code vertically, it's now giving you more information. You're getting more sentences and more information about Billy, about the Beatles, and you're getting closer to the truth. The fourth layer is a layer that where the book is inviting you to go out and research beyond the book. So the book is throwing information out. It's putting information out on the table, and it's saying to you, do you want to know more about this? Because if you do, you should research this. That's how I ended up looking into the music. There was a passage on page 350 or 351 in one of the earlier editions of the book, and they talked about how George Martin was going to take their little songs and make them great. And then the next page talked about the Snitch and the Committee of 300. So I knew that John Coleman wrote the book, The Committee of 300. And it's all about, this is a great book, folks. I highly recommend reading it. I think it was published back in the mid-1980s, around 35 years ago, and almost 40 years. And it's unbelievable what John Coleman has in that book. And the first thing you're going to say to yourself is, if this is what was going on 40 years ago, where are they today, 40 years later? Okay, that's just a side note. So Memoirs is asking you openly to go research outside the book. And, when some folks step up and say, oh, the book is fiction and this and that, the book is categorized as historical fiction. And the reason for that is because Billy and Tom and others, whoever is involved in the book, are bound by contract. They have signed non-disclosure agreements, secrecy agreements, and they have to keep within the boundaries of those agreements. And the way the fiction is set up in the book, it's based upon what the reader does not want to believe. Think about that. Think about how brilliant that is. So as an example, if I say that Aleister Crowley played a major role, his influence, his ideology, his philosophy, his spirituality, thelema, with the Beatles entity, and somebody doesn't believe Aleister Crowley had that type of influence, then they might deem that part of the book as fiction. In other words, Crowley was not that significant a figure, so therefore that part of the book is fiction. If you don't want to believe that Billy played the role of Vivian Stanshall in the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes, if you think that's a bunch of nonsense, then you're going to call that fiction. So this is what the book does. It pulls in all of these different points, and then the reader is making a decision based upon what it is they want to believe and not want to believe, what's fiction and what's not. The objective of the book is to not just shoot things out of the sky out of the start. You have to read it, you have to just sit with it, and then start doing the research to find out if what you're being told is truthful or not. And what I have told folks is the book is truthful. Are there threads of fiction in the book? Yes, there are threads of fiction in the book. Somebody might ask, well, what is one of those threads? In the book, in the main narrative, which is Billy speaking through Tom, Billy still talks as if John Lennon and Paul McCartney were these prolific songwriters. So Billy doesn't back off of that narrative. He drops hints, like I said, I mentioned before, as to how I got into looking into the music, but overall, he pretty much sticks to that narrative. It wasn't until after I released my big presentation about them not writing all their own music, especially between the periods of 1962 through 1966, the early period. From 67 on, the Beatles, specifically Lennon and George Harrison, wrote more of their own material and played more on the recorded tracks, but the Beatles were still using ghostwriters and studio musicians during the 67 through 70 period. But my position is, from 1962 through 1966, I don't believe the Beatles wrote anything. And I don't believe they played on any of the recorded tracks. It was the Wrecking Crew model that was used.
Well, and again, George Martin hinted at it. They brought 100 songs to him, and the only one was "Love Me Do," as he thought was halfway decent. But was any of them? They were supposedly writing 100 songs, but there's no reference to that. I remember Pete Best, when he was on Howard Stern's show, as an example, he asked, "Did you see him write any songs?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I think P.S. I Love You." You know, Pete Best obviously was just kind of making it up, and "Love Me Do." That's the only songs you saw. He was with them 8 hours a day playing and all that stuff. You know, that's the thing when you see these interviews, they'll say something like that, and you'll say, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. You would have seen him write more than that." So, you know, their own words tell you what's going on. And even John Lennon, in so many of his of interviews, he said, "Hey, we were a myth," because he's trying to tell you, "Hey, we didn't do this, man." You know, in the Rolling Stone interview.
Lennon, in his interview, in the Rolling Stone interview, said the Beatles were a myth, McCartney was a myth, Dylan was a myth.
Yeah.
And I mean, so that's what I did, John, too. When I did the presentation, I still do it to this day. I use their words.
Right.
And it's there in plain sight. You just have to read between the lines, and you have to be astute enough to, connect the dots and say, okay, well, they're not really saying they did this. They're alluding to maybe they did it, but they're not saying that they did. And, and just to go back to your point about the 100 songs, they didn't bring 100 songs to George Martin. There was a documentary going back to the 1980s called The Complete Beatles, and that was considered the Beatles documentary at the time until Anthology came out. And in that documentary, in The Complete Beatles, it states that the Beatles, well, John Lennon and Paul McCartney specifically, wrote 100 songs between them from 1956 to 1962. And yet when they went to Decca to do the demo on January 1st of 62, they were only able to muster up 3 original songs, which were nondescript. And, of course, we have the Mercy Beat article from September of 1962, where it's letting everybody know that Ringo Starr replaced Pete Best. But in that article, it mentions that the Beatles were flying to London to record at EMI to play songs that were written for them.
Right.
And given to them by their recording manager, producer, George Martin. And, so I did a whole piece, too, on the whole 1960 through 1963 period. And if we take a look at what was going on under the hood, they were an engineered band.
And most of the time when they played live, they always played cover tunes most of the time. Even when they were playing live, they'd always have 3 or 4 or 5, like Dizzy Miss Lizzie, they Roll Over Beethoven. They have all these great songs, but they weren't playing them live during that point. Just a few of them. And when they did, I maintain that all the screaming was what they wanted to scream, and so people couldn't really hear them that well for a reason, because they really weren't the best musicians out there anyway. So, and the 2 words that come to mind when you're talking about this is the CIA's favorite 2 words: plausible deniability. That's what and that's what all these people in this club, entertainment, politics, they have the same Beatle MO. Plausible deniability. That's what Billy's doing here with his book. It's, hey, I'm not going to say it happened, but hey, I'm going to give you a story here. And that's what you find in any truth movement that you go into, and you try to do your own research. You find plausible deniability everywhere. Other people at the top of the chain giving you the story. You know, they don't want to admit anything that you say, well, this looks like this wasn't the way. I don't think hijackers could have flown the planes. Why? Because they didn't know how to fly. Really, you learn in a
Right.
it's the same thing. The Beatles weren't really playing that good, but hey, they're out there live, but we couldn't hear them that well because that was a crowd noise. But you know, and the Wrecking Crew, we know that there was a guy. I think his last name was Martin. Graydon Martin, Nashville, was like the guitar player for all the Nashville songs.
Yep.
And the guy was, I just saw about him the other day. The guy could play like nobody, and I was watching some of his videos, but we never hear about the background people. We never do. So it had to be with them too. The songs were too slick together for them when you compare them playing the live thing.
The Beatles were taught songs to take out on the road, to take out live. They were the veneer,
Right.
and and what was happening behind the scenes is George Martin. The songs were written. I believe Theodore Adorno was involved along with George Martin. I don't subscribe to Theodore Adorno writing all of the Beatles' music. You'll hear some people say that. I don't believe that to be true. Adorno was very involved.
And he was at Tavistock, right?
Tavistock, yeah, that's a great book, Daniel Esterlin's book. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So the songs were all written, and studio players were called in to lay down the instrumental tracks. And so I have said it's highly likely that Vic Flick was one of the studio players on a lot of the Beatles songs. Big Jim Sullivan, who was a very in-demand studio guitarist back in the day.
And the drummer that said he played on 21 tracks, they said Ringo.
Bernard Purdy.
Ringo didn't play hardly on any of them, if at all.
No. So what Bernard Purdy had said, that there were 4 drummers on the Beatles tracks, and I believe Bernard was talking about the period between 62 and 66, and he said Ringo was not one of them. So those 3 drummers were Andy White, who the mainstream narrative, the official Beatles narrative, tells us that George Martin hired Andy White to do P.S. I Love You and to drum on Love Me Do. But I believe that Andy White was hired to do a lot more than just 2 songs. Bernard Purdy, who has been saying since the 1970s that he drummed on 21 Beatles songs. Ronnie Verrill, the great British session drummer, jazz drummer, also drummed on Beatles songs. And how do I know this? Because a family member contacted me going back after I released the presentation in April of 2020 and told me that, hey, Mike, now that the cat is out of the bag, Ronnie also drummed on Beatle tracks.
And Hal Blaine was another one, right?
I believe it's possible that Hal Blaine was another drummer for the Beatles. And because Bernard Purdy said that when he was fixing the records, when he was laying down the tracks, he was doing it at the Capitol Studios in the U.S. So for that to happen, then the tapes had to be shipped over or transported over from EMI over to Capitol. Now, Capitol is a subsidiary of EMI. It's part of the same family. Also in Memoirs is a footnote that drops a very subtle hint that another guitarist on the Beatles songs could possibly have been Glenn Campbell. And Glenn Campbell, of course, played for the Wrecking Crew.
And that's what Hal Blaine and a Capitol in L.A., the Beach Boys, and all the groups had used them all. And
Right.
It's just when you start to see that, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, has the Wrecking Crew been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Have they ever put them in?
I think some of them have.
Well,
We'd have to check that. I think some of them
but
have.
they all should be in. They played on all the records.
Yeah.
and
yeah,
the people that are in should not be because they didn't play on the records.
Yeah, you had them. You also had, in the U.S., you had the Swampers out of Muscle Shoals in Alabama.
Right.
I highly recommend. There's a documentary on Amazon titled Muscle Shoals, and they were doing the same thing as the Wrecking Crew. So what people have to understand is the music business, the entertainment business, is a business. and it's there to make money, and it's there to put a product out as cost effectively as they possibly can and make money. And the whole premise that these big time producers and these labels are going to spend a lot of time just jerking around with musicians that are not up to speed, that just can't bang out the tune. It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't
And
work
how
that
about
way.
auto-tune that came in to help the singers being on pitch? You were talking about that. We were talking back and forth on the emails.
Yeah.
That is another thing that is I mean, so many of these people that you see. There's a great video that Sasha pulled up about What, we showed up with Britney Spears, or actual singing. Ever seen that video? Where she's not really singing it live, and it's yeah. But that's how many other people. When you see them all running around dancing all the time, it's all about let's see how they can run around the stage. And there's no way you can sing it during that kind of thing. I mean, but they played her, and what she was really sounding like, and she wasn't singing anything close.
People have no idea.
Sounds like girl just needs one.
Yeah, no tighter than that.
Sasha's playing it right now.
Okay.
And when a girl is with one,
That's enough, Sasha.
Here's the studio version.
All right.
sometimes a girl just needs one.
You hear a difference in the studio versus the live?
Yeah.
And then you could take it to the Beatles too. Look at, like I said, when you listen real carefully, like the Shea Stadium, you know, they couldn't hear anything anyway, and they sounded halfway decent for being up there because they had such small mics and everything. But again, you take the studio version versus live, and it's night and day all the time. So, and remember what the Monkees said. Davy Jones said what the Beatles were. What was it his exact quote?
He said they were the first manufactured band.
Right.
Right. Now, what people don't understand is when they go to a live show, this has been going on for decades, folks. It's not just today. But what you're hearing during that show is a couple of things going on. Number one, there are many times there's a backing track that's being played. Okay, so these big bands are playing to a backing track. There are also off-stage or backstage musicians, whether they be singers, guitar players, bass players, or whatnot, that are there in order to supplement the live performance. And I went to a Foreigner concert going back about 5 or 6 years ago. It was their 40th anniversary concert. And, of course, they had those big television sets, right, so you can watch what's going on. And I was watching the guitar player. And by the way, not one of the original members of Foreigner was up there. So basically you paid good money to go see a tribute band. And as I'm watching what's being played, the guitarist, what he's playing on the guitar and what I'm hearing
Was different.
I'm like, it was different. Yeah. So the person I was with at the time, I said, are they playing to a backing track? And they said, I think they are. And so, you know, I watched a little bit more, and that's definitely what they were doing. So I wound up not staying for the concert. I left. I said, well, I'm not going to sit here and listen to a CD. I can go home and listen to Foreigner at home on a CD. So what folks don't understand is that there is so much that goes into the production on this stuff. I have a friend of mine who is out of Europe. He's a professional sound engineer, and he has shown me live concerts, and they're going to be released as a CD. What is done post-production is unbelievable. So it's so unbelievable that what you hear in that CD, if you were actually at the concert, that is not what you heard. The enhancements are so significant and so drastic, and it's done in order to package this thing, polish it up, very high production value when it goes out for sale on a CD or an album or whatever. And this also happened with the Beatles, okay? So I have footage of the Beatles in Budokan in 1966, and the beginning of Day Tripper starts, and both John and George did not play the riff, yet the riff was playing.
Right.
How could that be? There were backstage musicians that were playing the songs, helping them along. And this is, I actually had this captured, and I had two people who are in the music industry, two very, very accomplished people, come back to me and say, that's exactly what was happening. In fact, one person told me that that's what they used to do, not for the Beatles, but they used to be backstage or off stage, and they would play during live performances in order to bolster the pretty faces that were on stage. The other thing that's done, and it's done today, is backing tracks. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll mix the backing track in with what's actually being played on stage, or it'll be more of a backing track if what's being played on stage is of lesser quality, sort of sound quality, musicianship, and stuff like that. So a lot of the Beatles stuff that people keep bringing up, they'll send me videos and say, well, listen how good they sounded back in 1964 and 65 on stage. They're playing live and all that, and blah, blah, blah. Well, hey, by the way, they had 2-track recorders back then. How was it possible that they were able to capture that level of distinction between the instruments with a 2-track recorder? The answer is they couldn't. Okay? So what they did was, after these performances were done and these videos were released, well, in between the performances being done and the videos being released, there was post-production that was done to enhance the audio. Now, this sounds crazy to a lot of people, but again, I have folks, sources of mine, that have come back to me and said, yes, that is exactly what takes place. This is what happens. And there are clips out there that are not official releases of the Beatles playing live, and you can hear the difference in the musicianship. You can hear the difference in the sound quality. You've got this one which sounds very scratchy, rough, amateurish, and then you've got this other video here with a much higher level of production, and it sounds fantastic. Well, the reason why it sounds fantastic is because of all this post-production that went into creating the final product. So I probably talked a lot more about stuff than you wanted me to, but once I get on a roll with
as
this.
you said on my birthday, hey, it's your birthday, man. You can talk. You can talk as long as you want, man. Don't stop. I mean,
Yeah. The Beatles are a machine, John.
Hey,
They're a
do you
machine.
want to hear the song you wrote for your wife, Pretty Lady?
Yes, let's play Pretty Lady.
Pretty Lady. You got it up there, Sasha? Let's put that.
Here we are, you and me. It took some time for us to see, and now we're back where we belong, and that's the reason for this song. Pretty lady, I love you with all my heart. We had our ups, we had our downs. That rocky road turned us around. A little lesson from deep inside, telling us we need to try. Pretty lady, I love you with all my heart. I never stopped loving you. All alone, feeling blue. Lonely nights in my bed. Memories in my head. Pretty lady, I love you with all my heart. We met for lunch, and there you are. I saw you step out of the car. I want you back in my life. love you with all my heart. Holding hands into the night, waking up to the morning light. A brand new day, and it shines. I am yours, and you are mine. Pretty lady, I love you with all my heart.
It's one of my favorites of yours. I think it's great. I've heard it now about 5 times. It grows on me every time there, Mike.
Well, let me just say to my wife, hon, I love you very much.
And let me just say to her, too, Mike loves you very much if she's listening. In case she needs
She'll be listening.
Unless she needs, another one to say it to her so she knows it's true. There's suspicions that William Shepard, Billy Shears, is the son of him?
Yeah. So it's strongly alluded to in memoirs. There's no hard, concrete evidence, but it seems like it's highly possible that Billy is the son of Aleister Crowley. Because somebody would say, well, if I go onto Wikipedia, it doesn't show his name there. Well, it's not going to show his name there because, first of all, Crowley was heavily involved in sex magic. And the way sex magic works is if a child is conceived during a sex magic occult ceremony, then that child is identified as a special child and is then groomed and handled to achieve very significant positions in world affairs as they get on in life. So my suspicion is that Billy was the result of a sex magic ritual. He was conceived from sex magic, and then he was tapped.
And he has a glass eye.
Yes, he has an artificial eye.
And you know who else had a glass eye? I think I sent you an email. It was the Beach Boys' father, who was the guy who ruled the Beach Boys. He was a tyrant. He had a glass eye, too. Did you see that email I sent you?
Yes, yep.
And so glass eyes, the Eye of Horus or Ra. Right. And also the song, it was 20 years ago today, it kind of alludes to the fact that Crowley, wasn't it like 47 was when he
died in 1947.
And Billy would have been 10 years old, and he was taught by him. He was like taught the band to play. That was kind of what it was like.
Yeah, so in the book he explains that he was tutored by Aleister Crowley. So Billy was born in 37. Crowley died in 1947.
Well, Brian Wilson's dad was a composer, and it started to make me think about, he was musical before. He was a big influence on Brian, but eventually Brian fired him as their manager. But I thought about George Martin being the songwriter for the Beatles. I wonder if Brian was the guy or was his dad helping him out early with the songs. But they did steal some from Chuck Berry blatantly.
Yeah. Yeah, they were always, all the bands were always pinching and borrowing here and there. I mean, the Beatles did the same thing. But when you talk about glass eyes, a lot of people don't know this, that Jimmy Savile used to collect glass eyes.
And he was this pervert of child, wasn't he a pedophile? Big time.
Yeah, Jimmy Savile was a black magic occultist. Okay, so it's the whole glass eye ocular prosthetic is evidently very important in the occult. And yes, and it does go back to Egyptian mythology, the mysteries, right. Horus, Ra, and I covered this in a recent video.
Yeah, who was your friend that she had a glass eye? That's how she found it.
Yes, so Sally Whitty. Sally's a colleague. She's another researcher. She does excellent research. In fact, she's working on some research now that is going to be spectacular. We just have to get it pulled together. There's a lot there, but yeah, Sally has an artificial eye, and she picked up on it. And I said to her, we need to come out with this right away, because we were going to include it in a larger presentation that had to do with how the cultic elite tie back to mythology, like Odin and the Egyptian mysteries and so on. And I said, no, we can't wait. This has got to come out now. This can't be lost in the sauce because it's very important. To me, it's the most significant piece of evidence that we have that the guy that's playing Paul McCartney today is not biological Paul McCartney, because biological Paul McCartney, the real Paul McCartney, didn't have a glass eye, and Billy does.
And they also explain to people how the pictures you'll see, the left eye will be looking out, and the right eye you'll see in the different pictures will be staying the same.
The eyes don't sync up.
Right.
The eyes don't align. So like when you have two good eyes and you're looking at somebody, both eyes look in the same direction. When you have a prosthetic eye or an artificial eye, what will happen is artificial eyes do move back and forth. Some people think they're static, and they're not. It actually depends upon how much damage was done to the eye. And I won't get into all of this, but suffice to say that Billy's eye does move. Like many other people who have prosthetic eyes, their eyes move. But they don't move in sync. Both eyes don't. Sometimes they will be in sync, and other times they won't be. And there are many pictures out there, images where you can see, if you take a piece of paper and you isolate half of Billy's face, his left eye is his good eye, his right eye is his artificial eye, you'll see that the eyes don't align. So the right eye might be looking straight at you, whereas the left eye might be looking a little bit to the left. Lots of examples like that. The other reason why it was a very important discovery is because Billy uses doubles and lookalikes as well. And it helps us to identify when the lookalikes and doubles are in play. Because in memoirs, Billy tells us that he wasn't the only one, or he isn't the only one to have played the part of Paul McCartney. Others have played the role. It's just that he has the permanent contract.
And he's a great musician, too, as well.
And yes. And he is very schooled, formal education. You know, Billy can score music, read music, write music.
And it took the woman friend of yours who has a glass eye. Otherwise, this may not have been seen. Think about it. It took her saying, "Wait a minute, that looks like what I go through all the time."
Yes, exactly. So it is amazing that after 50 years, 50, 60 years really, that nobody else has picked up on it, including myself. I mean, I kind of leaned into it back in 2019 because when I was showing that he played the character Vivian Stanshall in the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes.
Right.
Neil and Billy were close. And I suspect that Neil Innes was one of the ghostwriters for the Beatles, especially during the later period, 67 through 70. If you don't believe me, go listen to some of the Ruddles songs.
That's one of my favorite albums, by the way. I got their greatest hits. I just when I first got that CD, I was playing it everywhere, laughing my head off.
It's great. I mean, it's great. And his impersonation of John Lennon, he has it down to a T. Right. In fact, I have a bootleg of one of Lennon's albums, and on the bootleg, they have a version of Cheese and Onions, which is a Ruddle song.
Right.
So either the person who put the bootleg together was pulling a prank, knowing that it wasn't John Lennon, and put it on the album, or they thought it was John Lennon who was singing a song called Cheese and Onions. But,
that's a great title, let me tell you.
Yeah. So when you look at Billy, and the Stanshall character, I noticed that the eyes. I said that Billy had his eye drifted. He had a wandering eye.
Right.
And I didn't realize that, no, he has an artificial eye, not a wandering eye. And that's what helped me to identify and to, at least in my mind, to confirm that he did play the character of Stanshall, because I can look at images of him and I can look at pictures of Stanshall.
And he had the same
and I can
kind
see
of
the
eye.
same eye configuration.
Right. That was another.
And then you have to ask
clue.
yourself, what are the odds?
And talk about that too with these other people. That I wonder if anybody else who doesn't read these books saw that. What are they going to say to that? You can't dispute that at all.
John, the level of denial is just unbelievable. What I've noticed what people do is they will just ignore what they don't want to look at, what they don't want to hear, what they don't want to be affected by. They will just ignore it. I see it all the time. Somebody will say, "You said this in the video, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, okay, well, what about the other 10 things that I pointed out?
Right.
They don't want to talk about the other 10 things because the other 10 things will sink their ship. You see? And by the way, the thing that they were trying to call me out on, they were wrong anyway.
Right. Well, there's all kinds of truth people. Limited hangout people are out there that will give you a lot of truth. Then you bring up something that you know they should know, and they say, no, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, then you're a limited hangout.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
And that's why going back to you are your truth group. You're in your truth, your own truth club. At the end of the day, I can't tell you, Mike, no, you got to do this or that. No, you'll look at it when you're due time, but you're still a truth person all the time, and that's what I am. And that's what people don't have an open mind to just looking at everything. Or there's a few things and there's a few things I can't say here that will trigger someone immediately, and you know what they are.
Yeah. Well, look, truth is not consensus. So there's truthers out there that they want consensus because it makes them feel comfortable, right? And by getting consensus, they might have a larger audience, but that's not truth. That's negotiation, right? That's negotiating with yourself. And I don't negotiate with myself. So I put my information out there, and it's not consensus. It's like, this is what I found. These are the dots I connected. And so I present it. And what I always tell my audience, John, is I'm not here to convince you. Really, I don't care about convincing you. I just like researching, and I like presenting my research. If you agree or it's something that resonates with you, fantastic. If it doesn't resonate with you, then that's okay too. You know, I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm really not, because if you're doing this type of work and you're doing it, it's not a popularity contest. You're going to have a whole lot more people not like you than people who like you.
Yeah, we got another one. Do you want? Is We Are One? You want to hear that one now?
We could do that, or do we have When You're Gonna Get It? Did I send you that?
Yeah, we got it.
Do you want to play that one then?
Yeah, let's end with that one. That's a newer song.
Okay, well, I'm going to end with, after yours, I'm going to play mine on the way out.
That's good.
Because that's for you, man.
Okay.
I hope everybody wrote down Mike's websites where you can buy these songs.
Sitting around, wringing your hands, making believe you don't understand. Gotta be a mama who carried the load, pulling you along that rocky road. When you gonna get it? When you gonna get it? Your tale of woe, all this time with little to show. Gotta be a daddy who did you wrong, making you feel like you didn't belong. When you gonna get it? When you gonna get it? All those years when you didn't pay your dues, singing along to the when you gonna get it? When you gonna get it? You don't understand. Gotta be a mama who carried the load, pulling you along that rocky road. gonna get it? All those years when you didn't pay your dues, singing along to the little boy blues. When you gonna get it? When you gonna get it?
When are you going to get it, folks? When are you going to get it? We've been lied to. When are you going to get it? Are you going to listen to the media, the mainstream media? Oh! Nice ending there, Mike.
Thanks, little feedback.
But, Mike, it's been a great... Listen, I've had so much fun on your birthday. I hope you've had as much fun as I've had.
It's been great, John. It's been a lot of fun.
I mean,
absolutely.
And 64, you know, and by the way, when you told me that on my birthday, I already thought about, well, Mike doesn't know it, but we're going to celebrate his because when I'm 64, huh?
Birthday greetings, bottle of wine.
Yeah, we got a lot of those things. But anyway, I hope everybody on the chat had a good time, as much fun as we had. We've covered a lot of topics. I tried to throw in things when I could, and press the like button. I never say that enough. And what's the other thing we're supposed to? Oh, subscribe.
Subscribe.
See, I'm not good at this. You could tell.
Oh boy.
And Sasha's great with the sound checks. Anyway, this is the song we're going out with, Mike. I have to play it. Sorry, don't fall for Paul. I wrote it because of you. So we got to play that one. And folks, remember, I have over 40 songs that are true songs about topics that range. And I will say this about Don't Fall for Paul. It's on my 12th. That's the least controversial song on the album, to give you an idea. Wouldn't you agree with that, Mike? It's the least controversial.
I would agree with that, John.
See? So if you want to go where Mike won't dare go because he can't. Only I do it because I'm a piano tuner. I've been tuning pianos for 47 years, 24,000, and I've tuned more celebrities in the last year than I've ever tuned. And if you want to hear what I feel about celebrities, watch my video on that. Remember the video on that one? Was it flattering to celebrities?
No, not at all. In fact, you should probably put it in private mode because you'll lose work.
Yeah, anybody that idolizes celebrities still ought to quit doing it. And again, part of this stuff with the Beatles, you can make an argument that they're the most idolized celebrities of all time, right? Wouldn't you say? In many ways.
Yes, because not only are there people idolizing them, but people are idolizing the bands that idolize them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have this thread that goes through.
I mean, how many times have you heard Billy Joel say his most influential band, the Beatles?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody. I mean, let's just go down the list. The whole list is Beatles, 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 Beatles. And I was the same way.
Watch any rock and roll documentary on any band, and at some point, they will talk about the Beatles.
Right.
Yeah.
But I say this, I think you like this, I coined this. We are all Tavistock influence musicians.
Yep. And that's who we studied. We studied the guitar playing of Vic Flick.
Or
Jim Sullivan.
Or Glenn Campbell.
Glenn Campbell. Yeah,
or right. Keyboards of,
Nicky Hopkins.
Russell.
Leon Russell. The drummer of Hal Blaine. Yeah. It goes on. Anyway, Mike, happy birthday. Everybody, go to his site, sageofquay.com. Go order his CDs. And if you feel like ordering mine, you know my website. By the way, I'm Lee Nemo on Facebook. So if you want to see me, I'm still on Facebook for one reason. Because I still like to put the truth out there, and I'm always restricted, I'm always banned, and all that stuff. But I'm not going to stop. I like to piss them off, you know what I'm saying? Woo! Here's Don't Fall for Paul for the great Mike Williams. Everybody sing along on the chorus.
Way back in 66, I believe Paul died. It was then quite a trick to keep the Beatles alive. Most say William Shepard was his name, a.k.a. Billy Shears. Since Sgt. Pepper, he's had the fame for all these years. John, George, and Ringo, too, were forced to carry on. So with Fall, they put those clues in so many of their songs. So they kept recording because no one noticed the change. And keeping it a secret, then there was no need to explain. Don't fall for Paul. He's not an original Beatle. Don't fall for Paul, because the music business is evil. Don't fall for Paul. That's not who you think he is. No, no. No, no. They had to part their ways. It made it easier for them all. The clues kept coming through. They never could forget Paul. Most say William Shepard was his name. So since Sgt. Pepper, he's had the fame. Don't fall for Paul. He's not an original Beatle. Don't fall for Paul, because the music business is evil. Don't fall for Paul. That's not who you think he is. No, no. No, no. Don't fall for Paul. He's not an original Beatle. Don't fall for Paul, because the music business is evil. Don't fall for Paul. That's not who you think he is. No, no. No, no.
By the way, fall is spelled F-A-U-L, folks, because that's what a lot of people call them too. Anyway, Mike, have a good night. Have a great dinner tonight.
Thank you. Yep, got to go pick up Mom.
Okay, take care, buddy.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.